Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Aware, Relaxed, Connected podcast. Join me as we explore approaches and orientations towards cultivating the physical body, the internal landscapes, the mind, and our relationship with reality as a whole. I'm your host, Craig Mallet. Okay, welcome to the podcast. I have a somewhat famous, sometimes controversial internal arts teacher, Damo Mitchell, on with me today. And Damo has spent a lifetime studying martial arts and internal training and meditation and all these kind of things, and has had a reasonable but far-reaching impact on my own work. I read his books and I listen to his podcasts, and little cues come through and inspire me in varying degrees. But this is the first time we've actually met sort of face to face. We're digitally face to face at least. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time, and maybe you can take some time to introduce yourself and what you do to the audience.
Sure, well, you kind of covered it there anyway, I think. But yeah, very nice to meet you here online, Craig. This is like modern version of meeting somebody, isn't it? That's what
Yeah,
we do these days. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. So I think you pretty much covered it. But I'm a practitioner primarily of qigong and neigong. I guess would be my my prime interest, my passion, if you like.
Mhm.
And then around that, I've had the other things that I've studied, the martial arts and Chinese medicine, that to me all form one big picture more than anything else. I don't see them as separate arts, but I definitely, my emphasis these days is on, Neigong and Qigong more than anything else, I would
Cool.
say.
And you've got like a Taoist tradition behind this, or framework, or something that's inspiring how it all works and fits together?
Yes, yeah. I mean, most of the tuition I did was within alchemical traditions, sort of Longmen Pai, Dragon Gate kind of stuff. But these days, I'm also very, very involved in a Chan Buddhist line. So, you know, there's similarities between the traditions, but differences. So I guess what I present more to the public would be the Taoist side of things, especially to keep it nice and tidy when I'm talking on podcasts or writing or something like that.
Yeah, nice.
But I think most people who've trained with me in person know that actually there's a big Buddhist influence on what I'm doing these days as well.
Yeah, cool. And so what you're presenting, I know you've got this like big online academy that's full of all sorts of training, and you're doing a full-time school in Bali at the moment. I've got a friend or two training there as well, who are loving it, by the way. So yeah, that I can't imagine that's a small task. But the things you're teaching, as I understand it, looking in from the outside, is basically just your understanding of this stuff. Have you been like charged with any of these lineages to present it as per a lineage, or is it more like Damo's understanding? How's it working?
I think that anybody, I mean, the truth is, well, okay, let's answer that in two parts. So what I was charged with originally was actually to present it as exactly as I was taught, certainly by the earlier teachers that I had, which there was nothing wrong with that because I was kind of young, so fair enough, better off following exactly what I'm told to do. But about 12 years ago now, time flies, and you've got that COVID's weird. It makes
Yeah, that's like a 3 year.
yeah. So about 12 years ago. Yeah. Time is odd. About 12 years ago now, I guess I transitioned to the teacher that I primarily work with at the moment. And it was actually a breath of fresh air because the instruction from him was basically to present it through the filter of who I am, actually. So increasingly what I've done is let go of, not the methods. The methods are definitely taught as they were taught to me, but I would say the way I explain them is definitely through my own language and through my own filter, which feels more honest because I don't think anybody ever can present anything purely. I mean, ultimately, I'm a working class white guy from the south of England. How am I ever going to present things as an authentic Chinese tradition if that's not who I am? So it's a lot more liberating to present it this way. So yeah, I would say that my explanations, while rooted in the traditions, are actually my own these days because I'm pragmatic and I'd rather get people to be able to do something in the right way rather than spout an alien philosophy at them.
And this is one thing that really drew me to your work. I mean, I've listened to, like I said, podcasts, read a stack of books, not all of them, but um, definitely just hearing in English from a native English speaker explanations of do this and do that, and then this will happen and that will happen, and having it all be presented very clearly without too much fluff did something. It kind of let it go in a bit deeper for me as a Western person, rather than trying to hear like a Chinese term and then translate in my mind, oh, that means this. So that's been super useful, and definitely something I've also recently started aspiring to. So yeah,
Well,
big thank you
glad it's
for
useful.
that. That's
I'm
cool.
glad it was helpful. Thank you.
Yeah, but there are still terminologies we've got to kind of wrap our heads around, especially for the audience. And one of the questions I always get is, what's the difference between Qigong and Neigong? And this seems to be different person to person, teacher to teacher, school to school. Some schools seem to separate exercises into these are the Neigong exercises and these are the Qigong exercises. When I was learning, it was just presented as an age thing. So Neigong was just an older term for the same thing, and Qigong was a newer term. I think your definition's a little bit different, so maybe you can kind of clarify that for the audience so we can be all on the same page as we're talking here.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I mean, a part of the problem with definitions is they do vary from person to person. So the definition of a word doesn't matter as much as how does the person teaching you or communicating with you define the word. I would say
Mm.
that's probably
Yeah.
the most important thing. So lots of the time when I'm teaching, yeah, people are used to me. I go into anal level of detail to define every single term, so at least people know how I am using the word. So for me, at least, Qigong and Neigong are differed essentially in the process involved in the two. So Neigong is a kind of wider term involved in the exploration of the processes that take you in, so inner work, basically. So it incorporates meditative training, energetic training, transformation of the body and the mind, and things like this. And when I use the term Qigong, what I'm usually referring to is the exercise that manipulates the energy, the Qi of the body. So Qigong is a tool that we might use to go into the Neigong process, but it's not the only tool. But I should say that is only the way that I use the term, and I'm quite aware that other people use it in different ways. Some people, Neigong means, sort of martial power as opposed to medical power, and other people, as you say, use it for historical periods of time for terms, and other people will use it to mean a specific Qigong system. And I think all of those are valid. I think it really depends on what it is you're trying to explain.
Yeah, nice. And then there's internal alchemy is like kind of sitting within the Neigong process as a different set of tools. Is that right?
Yeah, Neidam. So the elixir work, if you like, the Dan, it's kind of the essence of spiritual work. It's where meditation and energy work meet, I guess, if you like, somewhere along that border where the two come together. But I would encapsulate it within the Neigong heading, to be
Mm.
perfectly honest. So because Neigong is like a wider process to me in a work, then Neidam would be in there too. I
Yeah,
think
cool.
that,
So
sorry, go for it.
I was just going to say, just to clarify, you've got Neigong, this process of like cultivation of the interior of the person that's got all these little tools within it. That's the Qigong and the Neidan, and maybe even meditation is a tool within
Yes.
there. That's kind of how you're presenting it. Is that right?
Totally. But it's definitely very confusing because if I think of the people I train with, for example, they will kind of use the terms in the same way, but then sometimes when they're speaking, you'll realize they start to use Qigong in the definition that was Neigong, and they'll use Neidam when they mean Neigong. So there's definitely an interchangeability with the terms that I see people doing. I'm probably a little bit more of a stickler with them than some of the other people within my tradition, but that's how I tend to use them anyway when I'm teaching people.
Cool. So I just want to dive into the all of this interior work, the internal work that the way you do it, it's not so common in the world. It's getting more common now, and probably partly because of your influence is getting wider, and people are maybe not even training with you, but doing a workshop and then taking that and running with it and discovering things and all the rest. But this idea of qigong, I think, if I understand the history of it right, like the 70s and 80s, there was like this kind of Mantak Chia esque new age explosion of this stuff. I have a memory of learning at my first qigong set as this like traditional ancient whatever thing, and then years later I go look it up online, and it turns out it was invented in the 70s by the Communist Party as an exercise for everyone. Um, and most people I know, their experience of Qigong is you'll be standing there, there'll be some gentle flowing kind of standing exercise that's kind of stretching, usually cued with breathing. Breathe in, then do this, breathe out, then do this. And then often also cued with like imagining something, picture a light, or imagine water flowing or something like this. And it's definitely not how I do things, and I'm about 99.9% sure that's definitely not how you do things, but maybe you could kind of explain how what you do is different to that, and we can kind of get into the details of that.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you basically defined the opposite of what I do. Completely, yeah. But you're right. That's the majority of what people would associate with qigong, which is a post-cultural revolution sort of take on it within China, because they wanted to make it more presentable. And also, there was a movement within China to move everything away from the spiritual and move it towards the psychological, which was a very big distinction that they started to make. So
Was
I
this
think that,
like a deliberate move?
yeah, yeah, there was. I mean, communism, I don't want to get into politics. Everyone has their own views on such things. But one thing that communism is not usually a huge fan of is people individually seeking spiritual liberation. They generally prefer the mass effect and things out into larger groups of people. So what they did was lots of arts like Tai Chi, Gong Fu, Neigong, Qigong were either outlawed, or then after that period of the Cultural Revolution, simplified and stripped down so that you had a sort of mass version for people. And really what they wanted was something that quietened people's minds and increased their health and relaxation, really, which is why they moved towards what you described, which is breathing exercises and moving the arms gently and imagining things. And I'm not like morally or even principally against that form of qigong at all, not even slightly. I think if you're going to pass a tradition on to the masses, I think teaching them to breathe deeply and move in a relaxed fashion and focus their mind, I think, is fantastic. But it's just not what I do. It's something different. And the older, I would say, or more classical versions of qigong practice, a lot of it is static for a start. I mean, so there's not a huge amount of movements. Movements are used to transform the physical body a little bit because it's easier to do while moving, but a lot of the work is actually done still. And then the breath actually has very little to do with the movement of qi, so therefore the breathing is not really used particularly either. Breathing is used in a different way. And then visualization and imagination are diametrically opposed to one of the key principles, which is wu wei, which is to none, govern, or contrive through the use of intention in qigong. So essentially, my definition or practice of qigong would be largely static work that is separate from the breath, that doesn't use any visualization in order to explore the nature of subtle energy that can be built inside the body once it reaches a level of efficiency. So it's not as approachable, and I think probably not as sensible to give out to the masses as well anyway, to be perfectly honest. I don't think it's what everybody should be engaged in. But it's more geared towards spiritual cultivation in the most literal sense of the words than it is for health or something like this. But sometimes people, whatever they do, will think it's the best thing. I don't. I think the best thing is what helps the majority of people. And since the majority of people out there actually just need to relax and they have bad shoulders and bad back, I actually think the other form of Qigong is more than suitable for large groups of people. So it's definitely not my view that everything else is shit or something. I'm just very aware that it's very different what I do.
Yeah, the difference is, I mean, this is something I also rub up against, trying to say it's different without necessarily saying one's better and one's bad. They do different things and they have different outcomes. And
Cool.
yeah,
Yeah.
this idea of like the purest mind, right, is the pure one, and nothing else should be allowed is kind of also a bit weird, in my view. But I know so many people, like elderly people, who get a lot from this, who they're getting out, they're stretching every day, they're moving. It's fantastic. So not to take away from that stuff, but just to
No,
clarify
absolutely.
that it's actually really nice. It's just very different. It's different in the same way, I don't know, gymnastics and CrossFit is different,
Yeah.
where they can kind of look the same, but they're going to have very different outcomes and very different training methods. So maybe we can dive into a little bit of like I'm a beginner. I've never done Qigong before. I rock up at Damo's school. What kind of things am I going to run into? What's the point of this interior work? What are we working towards?
Well, the first thing when people rock up and encounter us is sometimes they're a little bit surprised, especially if they've come from some of the other Qigong traditions, because we start very fundamentally with the physical body. So the view we have right from the start is that you require the right body to do whatever practice you're doing, in the same way that I couldn't be a ballet dancer. I'm definitely not built for that, and I wouldn't have the right body for tennis or something. I would have to train for that. The same applies to Qigong as well. So right at the beginning, then what we have to do is kind of reorganize and recondition the body so that it's more efficient for Qigong practice, which is very involved. So a lot of beginners, if you say, right from this outset, are basically taken through a process to redesign and reconfigure their body so that it's easier for things like the dantian to the magnetic energy center in the abdominal space, if you want, if people aren't familiar with that term, to gather in this area of the body so they can actually start the Qigong journey. The second thing you asked is, why should they do it? And I know that's always like a big question. And I used to give people reasons, and now I don't. I I spent my whole life trying to convince people not to do it, actually, because I know how involved it is. And I think if you can take pleasure out of going and watching a football game, do that instead. But I think it's easier. But there's a large number of people around the world that just have a calling, and there's no real major reason why. And if I have 100 people or 150 people in front of me in a public course, which is not uncommon, and if I went around and asked most people why they're training, a lot of them would probably answer that they're not entirely sure, but they get benefit from it. Their health improves, and definitely their mindset improves, and they're engaged with a very fascinating process, and they're loving the art they're doing. But I think that meaning behind any spiritual art is very hard to place because it's so hard to define spirit. So if I was doing something very, very physical, you could probably say, well, I'm doing this for fitness, or I'm doing this for health, or I'm doing it to be more attractive to the opposite sex, or whatever people are doing, or I like to win things. And if you're doing something psychological, you could say, well, it's because I'm tired of being depressed or angry or whatever. If you're unhealthy, obviously you do something to increase your health. But when it comes to sort of spiritual aspirations, you see, it's very difficult to define because it's not of the body and it's not of the mind. So therefore, it is a calling. There is nothing else for it. So a longer answer to that is, the only thing I check is it's not based on a desperation, because I think that's an unhealthy reason to be involved in spiritual arts, which a lot of people have, because they think it's the answer to all of the world's problems is to escape samsara and something like this. But as long, I would rather almost that people had no clearly defined reason why they're engaging with the process other than they just love it, because I think that's the healthiest reason to do anything, personally.
Cool.
So sorry if that's an unsatisfying answer, but that tends to be how I look at it, actually.
It's definitely where I'm headed to, and the way I phrase it to people is, you've got motivation from fear and motivation from curiosity. You know, this kind of fire and water dynamic, and the motivation from fear in these arts always go badly, because generally with fear you're trying to get away from it, and these arts will just bring you straight back towards it. Whereas motivation from curiosity is like, what can I discover if I do this stuff? What's going to happen? I find that it's definitely the motivation I've always felt, because I've had been lucky enough to have a good life, a lovely family. I've done well enough materially. I'm healthy, I'm fit, and psychologically, I presume I'm sound enough. It's always hard to tell when you get close enough to the mind.
Sure.
Um, but it's like, at one point, I ran into enough people doing these arts who were not nice people, but had incredible skills,
Yes.
and I was like, "Okay, this isn't going to solve me into a superior human." Um,
No.
it
No,
it's
that's
it
very true.
and so if it's not going to do that, why am I doing it? And it came back to this, it's just fascinating. Like, the world is fascinating, this unfolding of this internal process is fascinating, even if it's not always easy. So yeah, maybe we can kind of get into that. There's the way I talk about it, and I think yours is similar. Again, I don't want to presume your thing. I've read some stuff, and there's always like what's presented to the public and what's actually going on might be slightly different or completely different. But But my approach to this is to get awareness to occupy the body entirely, to kind of dive in and soak through and release from being bound in the mental structures and kind of saturate the physical structures. And my experience of this is as you go in, you kind of run into everything that's like and all scrunched up and gross and injuries from your past and scar tissues, and then they're tied to old emotional habits that you didn't know were there. And there's this like slow revealing of the fullness of yourself, both the good and the bad. So there's all this potential stuck down there, but there's also all this like horror of what you might call trauma or something from your past that you tend to run into. And these two things, in my experience, go hand in hand. So maybe you can talk a bit to your experience of that, like as you descend in and you run into these things, and what that's like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you want the longer version of it, I think that for a start, my definition of this from the beginning is obviously this mind-body connection where the mind has to saturate into the body like water into a sponge, as I often define it to people, isn't an automatic given thing. And in my experience, from what I've seen, well, also my own training, to get the mind into the body takes people a minimum of about 3 years. I very rarely see anyone manage it before that so that the two are integrated. And it doesn't matter what they've done before. What they often have is mind-body interference at the beginning, so that basically one is negatively impacting the other. And there's a process of getting the mind to soak into the body and then to let go through the process of applying deeper levels of attention until the two are working at the same time, or at the same level, working sort of synergistically. So at the beginning, most of those things that you were talking about, traumas or blockages or whatever people find inside the body, the discomfort, the sort of mental patterning that's there in the physical body, is because they don't have a proper mind-body connection. They have that mind-body interference instead of mind-body integration. So a lot of the arts at the beginning are about this. So sinking the mind and releasing it. But interestingly, especially because it's Qigong, there's a mechanism behind it. And that's what makes it so interesting to me as a process, because meditation systems may talk of something similar, but they often don't have, not always, but they don't always have a physiological process that matches it, right? It's sort of discussed in the mind. Whereas Qigong or Neigong will have a instruction, quality, mental aspect to it, but then they'll have a physiological or physical reflection or mechanic in the body as well. So the mind that saturates into the body is almost like a fluid that moves through us. And unfortunately, the body is not open enough to receive that fluid in the first place anyway. So a whole part of the process of getting the mind and the body to integrate is to continuously pull and tease and reshape the body open to make more space, more space, more space, so that the mind can go in. And from what I've seen and what I understand, it's because the nervous system and the soft tissues are able to sort of receive the mind into the body, if you like, but only once they're free and once all of those adhesions and blockages are gone. So that process itself, as you say, it can be unpleasant. You encounter all kinds of things on the way in. It's like, oh, I didn't know I was in so much discomfort, which isn't always the nicest realization halfway through a Qigong lesson or something like this to encounter. But I think part of the great beauty of it is that when, at least the way I teach it, or the way that I was taught it as well, is very little bit is done psychologically with the mind. So what we are doing is almost depersonalizing it in a way. You know, it's like, okay, sure, this may be a psychological trauma from 35 years ago, who knows, like whatever. Or it might be a bad posture from last week. Like the human discerning, the mind's ability to accurately discern what something is actually not as good as we might think. So you're encountering all these things, you go in, and we tend to try to release them from the body and from the energy rather than through the mind. So there's very little in the way of sort of deep emotional releases that people go into. It's more that we try to get it as a sort of deep bodily release, which then, because the mind and the body is integrated, you don't have to re-experience that thing, and then the mind reconfigures because of that problem being cleared from the system. As opposed to some methodologies that you might do it through the mind, but that means you have to experience every single psychological hang-up over and over and over and over again, which is, for most of us, would be a slightly torturous process unless you've had a very easy existence.
Yeah.
So I prefer the bodily approach. It's like, what do you do? Do you experience the imbalances of the body through your mind, or the imbalances of your mind through your body? I'd definitely rather do the second one, so that it's a sort of physical process. So that's kind of what we're working on. I would say that maybe where my definition differs a tiny little bit, but only because I'm a horrible nitpicker, is that I don't talk about awareness. Actually, I talk about attention, because there's a hierarchy of qualities of the mind within something like Qigong. And of course, any teacher will use terms slightly differently. But to me, the intention is the most active part of your mind, the bit that you're in control of, or not in control of, as the case may be, but your mind is doing something. And then beneath that, you have attention, when your mind moves more towards rest. And that is the minimal state that you were required, minimal state you will need to get to with regards to your mind to get it into the body. And then for me, the way I use the terms is, once the mind and the body are fully integrated so that you are soaked in, you're now on the doorway of inside, if you like, which is the body. And then if you manage to release further inside, then you encounter the awareness, which is more the state of the mind when it's not doing anything. And that is, I would say, actually a pretty good landmark. Like, when people hit that, when they can go intention, attention, awareness, I would say that's already a pretty deep level. And that's kind of what we're trying to do for a long time with people.
Yeah, cool. So that kind of like draining the mind into the body,
Yes.
you said, is done like statically to begin with. You've got things like Wuji posture, which I know I've seen probably like 20 different Wuji postures in my time.
Yes.
But they're more or less standing upright with the arms neutral, the legs kind of neutral, a little bit sunk, just to get this process started. But we want to, we don't want to speak on your behalf, but I understand that then the idea is to get this available as things get more and more complex, more and more chaotic, more and more things moving without the mind popping back up into the mind. It can stay kind of saturated into the body. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, sure. I mean, in Wuji, literally, if we define it in a practical sense, it means without projections or without limits. So really what we're talking about is a posture that does nothing. That is the idea. Every system should have a posture that literally does nothing, meaning it applies no variables into your body, so that what you're left with is just your physical form devoid of instructions, and then your mind. So as soon as I start moving or adjusting or shifting posture, then it's no longer Wuji, because you're giving an instruction to the body, whether you're moving up and down or opening and closing your arms or waving your spine or whatever you're doing. So we do have movements to open up the body, because it's a lot easier to open the body while you're moving, but most of the saturating of the mind into the body is done static. Yeah. And I think that was pretty much classically how it's always done. There's always the story of the teacher who made you stand in Jamjong for 3 years before you were able to have a conversation with him or whatever. But what they're getting at is the idea that the mind saturation has to happen through the static body. Yeah.
Okay, cool.
And then, as you say, to sustain it whilst you're moving is another mission. Yeah.
Yeah. There's also like different ways of moving it around. From, in my experience at least, there's this kind of hand-led way where the movements of the hands tend to mobilize the chi or the mind in the body, move this kind of lump of attention and awareness around. I'm going to try and get on your page with terms, because I use these slightly differently, but I think we're kind of...
I don't mind, honestly. No, go for it. I've only stickler for terms because I know people define them differently, but
Yeah. So you've got this like kind of idea of the hands leading, let's call it the energy for now, around the body, this kind of accumulation of interiority around, down through the legs, up through the torso, whatever, guiding the movement. But then you have arts like Tai Chi, where it's more like that movement from the interior then provokes a bodily experience, including the hands. And so there's like working from one end and the other. Can you maybe speak a bit more to that?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the difference between, I think how most people maybe would understand it if they listen to this, is the Tai Chi where you're talking about is the center leading the hands. So that the center of your body moves, your waist or your center line or whatever, moving the hands. Within Qigong, actually, it's the opposite. It's your hands move your center. which you can see from the majority of movements in Qigong. You are opening and closing your hands or raising and moving them. There's a couple of reasons. Firstly, with something like Tai Chi, you're trying to get martial power. So generally with martial power, it's better to move your center so that the power reaches the hands. Where in Qigong, I'm not normally trying to hit people. So therefore, it would seem light in a Qigong class to do that.
Yeah.
So therefore, there's no need for me to get that sort of powered up sort of center out to the hand. So therefore, I simply do it the other way. So I use what they call the palace of toil, the place of work in the center of the hand where the work is guided by. And then the hands are used to mobilize essentially the magnetism around the inside of your body. I think that almost all moving Qigong, almost all, there's always exceptions, the vast majority of moving Qigong really is that the hands are being used to lead the Qi around the body, not the center leading the hands. I think that's a bleed over of Tai Chi principles. But I actually consider the using of the hands to move the Qi around a form of Neigong, like using the external, the body, to mobilize the Qi inside, whereas some people would associate Neigong with breaking bricks on your head or something. I talk about it as a way of using the hands to mobilize the Qi. And then what happens after a while is it's no longer required. I mean, once you get to a stage where the Qi is fully saturated into the body and full, and the body is filling, and the Dantian is starting to energize the body and fill it with the yin Qi, then the hands are not really needed anymore. And then the tradition, or your practice, starts to move from 90% Gong, using your hands to mobilize things at the beginning, through to largely static alchemical work, which is the body is sat still, and then using qualities of the mind to do the work. But since it's, I mean, that's quite deep work and it takes a long time to get there, you may as well use the easiest method you can, which is using your hands to drag it around. I mean, I'm not a believer in using the hardest method to do something. I think I'm practical. Use the easiest thing you possibly can to do it. And a part of the reason for this is something that I didn't understand for years. I didn't get it. Nobody really explained it to me. So I didn't, and it just sort of clicked one day. Yeah, that's what I'm doing. Basically, the more Qi that you accumulate in the literal sense, the more magnetism fills your body. It is magnetism, even the sense and the experience of it pushing and pulling on the body, and it organizes in fields. That's the Qi that matters, not the stuff that races up and down through your body. It's the stuff that organizes and gathers. The more that magnetism builds, then what happens is the more I rest my mind, the more my attention is drawn towards the magnetism. So that's what happens. So when somebody doesn't have a lot of Qi inside the body, not much of a magnetic center, as soon as they rest their mind, it races into the thoughts. So maybe you have to follow the breath or follow a movement or focus on a point under your nose or something to gather it. But actually, if you build up enough of the Qi within the body and there is enough of a magnetic center, as soon as I apply a neutral rested attention into the body, it will race straight down to where that magnetism is and sit there, so that the Yi, your mind if you like, and the Qi start to integrate and become one. And that's what I'm mobilizing around the body. So you have a combination of your kind of energetic center, the body's magnetism, and your attention going into all these nooks and crannies of the body that we have, and then we're dragging this around, and this is what's causing everything to open up on the inside. And for me, it's not very poetic, but I probably ruined all the Chinese art and beauty of it, but that's the kind of mechanism for a lot of the Qigong for a very long time.
And that dragging around is what you eventually start using after the initial period to open the interior more, right? You're kind of dragging that stuff around that's getting into all the little nooks and crannies the gross exercises can't really reach.
Totally. It's something that it's like people will encounter because the Qi doesn't really open what we might call the external muscles, biceps, triceps, things like that. Not really. It's not really that. It's they talk about it being the huang, or the stuff that sits between the bone and the muscle. So we're looking at fascia and connective tissue and things. The only reason I don't use fascia is because everyone's got a totally different definition of fascia these days.
Yeah.
So the squishy, snotty stuff that's in amongst all the muscles and connects your muscles to the bone. And at the beginning, it's kind of slack, that stuff. It's not amazing. You can't do a huge amount with it. But the Qi, when it gathers, will pull on it. So at first, when there's only a little bit of Qi within the body, there's not really much going on. It's a little bit of a stretch or something. But when the Qi gets very, very full, when you start to mobilize it around, it's incredibly uncomfortable. And this is something that at least with the way that we work in Neigong, I try to explain to people is it's no longer like a relaxation exercise. It's definitely not bloody relaxing. It's more like exercise, because when that chi is there and that it's solidified enough, or what they say in Qigong, condensed or gathered, it's now thick. So when I start to mobilize that magnetism around the body, it will sort of push open the spaces in the muscles, or the spaces in the between the bones and the muscles, and widen that kind of connective tissue network. And the feeling is all of a sudden like a TENS machine and a pressure being dragged around the inside of your body. That is what is needed to open the deeper tissues, or well, to open what they call the channel system inside. To me, they can't be relaxed open. They can only be pressurized open. And they're pressurized open by the mobilization of this sort of dense chi. So students who encounter this, and I'm aware that we're talking and the public are listening, so I'm aware you're aware of this. So I don't want to preach to the choir. I know you have your own expertise. I hope you understand.
Please, no, this is kind of like I like teasing this stuff out of people. It's great. Please.
Yeah, I just feel bad because I'm talking to someone I already knows. But it's like when you start pulling it around, students are often surprised / horrified how much pressure it is inside the body and how much effort it is to move. So sometimes when they get to the stage where the dantian is gathered and they want to move that chi, sometimes it even catches and sticks, and then they just can't do it because the body is too closed, and you have to kind of work it through the body. So it's funny. It's like a balance of, like, you've got this deep release work going on, which is based on sort of resting and letting go. But then you've got the other side of it with the Qigong, which I would say is actually more addition and accumulation. And you're kind of dragging this through your body to open everything up. And I think it's definitely a fascinating process. And I think that's when a lot of people get captured by it, when they're starting to engage with that kind of work. And to me, this is what the Chinese were talking about in the Yi Jing Jing, the sinew changing classic, was about this, was the accumulation of qi until you could move it through this layer of the body that we call the channels, so that your body would transform, the sinews would become strong and robust inside the body.
And then as they get more open, they can handle more pressure, and then you can do this more, and this kind of like cycle increases, right? One of the things I kind of point to, just to kind of to circle back to the start where we said why, as a mundane why, it's just learning to deal with pressure in a very simple way. And for me, the world's just getting more and more pressure about it, and if you can't let that pressure move through you, you're going to be in more and more trouble. You're going to end up reactive to the world more and more and more as the pressure increases, because it gets more mental out there. And oh, I have lost something. Give me 2 seconds.
No problem. Yeah, go for it. Tech failed.
Oh, tech failed.
Oh, and you flipped.
Yeah. I don't know what's going on. This will be audio only, so I'll probably just slice this little bit out.
Yeah,
So there's like increasing pressure in the world, and one of the byproducts of this art, again, it's not the point. I think what you kind of spoke really nicely to that love of the art as being the point, and the love of discovery maybe. But one of the byproducts is you get extremely comfortable dealing with a lot of pressure, and it stops bothering you, and you stop having to react to it. So even when someone's in your face putting psychological pressure on you or emotional pressure on you, you can just go, hey, it's fine. It's not, I don't have to worry about this, because I'm so familiar with higher levels of pressure that are way beyond this, just from my practice, that this is like a walk in the park. And I definitely found that, especially in COVID times, all the people I knew who were good practitioners were enjoying it, and all the people who were not happy with pressure were having a really bad time.
Yes, I think that's very true. And I think if I take that a bit further, maybe with how I would see it, is also for people to realize that the pressure is not even real in the first place. Because sure, it's true, people can get in your face, people are difficult sometimes, but actually 99% of our pressures that we have in life are only imagined. I mean, the vast majority of it. I mean, there's this whole view, isn't there, that life is harder now than it was in the past. And I kind of try to compare myself to sort of living in a village where the next village might come in to sort of rape and pillage and kill all your village folk and take your land, or the plague might have killed your third child, or something. And I think actually life is way less pressure than it used to be. I think actually life is far more comfortable. Life expectancy is better, health is better, I think is all good. So actually, I think a lot of the pressure is only imagined and fabricated. So I think a part of the reason, and then that's not to take away from anyone listening to this who has difficult things going on in their life, because of course I'm aware those things still exist. But at the same time, you pick up this thing, this device, oh, sorry, we're not on camera, a mobile phone, you know, whatever, and you're looking at it and you're worried about some village that got flooded in a country that you've never been to, and 4 people being murdered in another country here, and statistics of a city you don't live in where people are getting stabbed 5 times as often, and so on and so on, plus World War III, plus another COVID coming, plus alien invasions from 31 Atlas, or whatever it is, and it all sort of builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up and builds up until you kind of realize from cultivation that maybe I can explain this badly. I'll try. When you sit, say you just sit and you breathe and you put your mind into your body and you have no method. You're just sat there, just chilling out, gonna sit quietly, okay? What you are confronted with is what is happening for you right now. And I think while I'm sat here, there's no pressure. None of those things going on in those other places are affecting me. Nothing is impacting me. I'm actually okay. The only thing I can feel is the floor under my butt and my breath moving inside the body. That is my actual reality of what is going on. You know what I mean? Like, that's it.
Mm.
And then you come out and you come back into the outside world, you look at the phone again, you listen to the news, and all the pressure comes back. And then I think through more internal cultivation, alongside what you're saying of getting used to physical pressure on the body, you start to realize that the reality of what you actually encounter when you're sat in the present moment is what is actually going on for you.
Mm.
And then the other bit, when you're not inside, is not actually reality. And then I think that's why a lot of the pressure stops affecting you after a while, because you just don't equate with that stuff on the outside. So a lot of the time for me, when I'm out in the world and dealing with things, it's going to sound bad and people won't like this. So maybe they'll say it's too detached, but sometimes I feel like I'm watching TV, watching the world on a TV screen. And even when people are telling me this thing is happening, I'm like, okay, you've told me, but it's not my direct experience. So I take that information, but it doesn't really load up my nervous system or increase the pressure particularly. So I think that if I've explained that badly, I apologize, but I think there's 2 sides to it. One, yes, somatically, you get used to physical pressure, and arts like Tai Chi and things like that will obviously have their own sort of layer of that too. But then you also have the sort of mental recognition of the nature of what is your personal reality, and then actually that alleviates a lot of the pressure
Mm.
for people as well. So I think people are living in a fabricated pressure world for the large part.
My experience with this is that, and you know, kind of directly related to the internal process, at least as I know it, is that we have this word release, right? Which more or less talks to pressure, like releasing of pressure is pretty much what you're talking about when you see someone with a shoulder that's all like, yeah, and you say, point to the shoulder and say release. It's like releasing that pressure that's built up in there. We call it tension or whatever. Um, and what I started to notice was that release didn't actually mean let go of the muscle tension. It meant let go of the mind's conclusion that it should or shouldn't be like that. So
Yeah.
it's like releasing these kind of conclusions constantly. And then as I brought this process into my greater life, you know, we're perpetually bombarded with all this stuff that's kind of really trying to make the mind conclude this or that, um, whatever. And that takes you inherently out of being connected to where you are at this point in time. And so I started to go, okay, well, it's about releasing conclusions. And where I see you get to when a conclusion is released is this great mystery, this great unknown. Like, oh, this confrontation with I don't know. I don't actually know what's coming. And, uh, you know, as soon as we get too close to a mystery, it reminds us of death because that's like the ultimate I don't know thing that's going to happen for all of us at one point. And so we go, no, 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 bring back the I know, and it must be like this, and it must be like that, and you know the whole system goes around those conclusions. So I've started really investigating, noticing when my mind becomes habitually concluded around anything, um,
Yes.
and you know, if I'm honest, it's what got me into your work too, because uh, y- I've got lots of friends in the internal martial arts circles, and for those who don't know, Damo's got a, let's call it a reputation in these circles. Some
Okay.
people go like way out of their way to call him a woo master and all these kinds of things just because he demonstrates this stuff they don't understand. And I mean, I've heard all sorts of crazy stories about you that and when I ask these people, I'm like, have you met him? Have you trained with him? No. Oh, so where are you getting this information from? Oh. And I realized I'd made some conclusions about you and anyone else I've never met as well. And when I let go of those, I was just like, oh, I can actually just look at this. As you say, when it's a book, it's just a book, it's information. When it's a video, it's a picture and some information. And I can go, well, that information is whatever, but I don't actually know. And that letting go of that opened this potential to go, well, what if I go that way? Or what if I go that way? Or what if I lean into it? And particularly for the various controversial characters that are around online, showing up here and there, I started doing this little process of, well, what if what they're showing is 100% true? Would I want to actually train that, and would I want to get those skills? Not knowing if it is or not, like just as a little thought form. And if it ended up as like yes, then I'd actually just go out of my way to hunt it down a little bit and try it and see for myself. And then I could actually have an experience, and whether I wanted to continue pursuing that experience or not was then based on some lived thing, not this kind of concluding mind. So I really kind of dove into that, just a life sense, but bringing that process down into the body. And I think might have been you on a podcast recently with someone said you noticed releases like put the mind in. Maybe you can explain it better than me trying to paraphrase you. Something about putting the mind in the body and releasing the mind.
Oh, the sung process. You're talking
Yep.
about the sung process.
Yep.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I mean, sung is for sure. I mean,
Sorry, I went around about six bends. So
no, I apologize. No. The first thing, I'll step back a little bit. You're talking about sort of people's reputations as being woo-woo or something like that. First thing, I'm completely woo-woo. Like absolutely 100%. I embrace it. I've never really understood why it's an insult. I'm a teacher of the esoteric arts and qigong. Of course, I'm woo-woo. And it's like otherwise I would be doing, I don't know, like Pilates or something. I don't know, something with the body. I don't even know what body arts are. Um, so no, absolutely, completely. But my woo-woo sort of approach, if you want, is more within the qigong world, because it's funny. I'm quite known sometimes for Tai Chi, but I'm not like Tai Chi is a hobby to me. I'm not even particularly interested in it. It's the qigong that really captures me, and it's funny that everybody gets sort of very caught up on the nature of sung and stuff in Tai Chi, because it's actually a very simple process, which is really what you highlighted here, is that once the mind and the body integrate into one another, so they occupy the same space, which, as I said, takes a little while. It's not something that anyone just off the bat can do. They can localize their mind in the body, but that doesn't mean that it's soaked in and saturated into the right level of the tissues. That's a very, very different thing. But once that happens, what it means is what happens in the mind is reflected in the body. So therefore, if I place my mind into a region of the body, or the whole body ideally, but that's a perfect world, and then you rest your mind so that it is further away from intention, then your body will start to emulate what your mind is doing, and then it will start to what we do sung, which is it starts to open up. So sung is not relaxation, because relaxation you can do with a bubble bath. Sung is more, I've got to a point where my mind and my body can occupy the same space in the correct way because I'm saturated into the form. Then when I use the correct mental quality of rest or attentiveness, then my body will start to let go and to open up. And then the byproduct of this is it will start to cause stretching motions to happen automatically through the inside of the body as it decompresses. And that's what then creates the movement for something like Tai Chi or Jin, as they call it. And Jin, most people would define as power. And I think that's probably like force, like something like that. And I think that's probably true for something like Long Fist or Praying Mantis or, those kind of external systems. I think that's true. It's like a percussive power. But in Tai Chi and arts like this, it very specifically to me means when the mind releases and the Qi mobilizes, the energy mobilizes inside, then all of the tissues will start to decompress and elongate of their own accord, and that it creates Jin. So Jin is the interaction of the mind and the body and the energy and the decompression all at the same time to create the power of Tai Chi. And actually on that level, It's not very woo-woo. So that's what I mean. It's quite funny that people would associate Tai Chi with woo-woo, but I consider Tai Chi to be actually a very sort of mechanical, somatic arc. I consider Qigong and Neigong to be far more esoteric and out there. We're talking about the soul and the spirit and the sort of process of the afterlife and things like this, which we're not normally worried about in Tai Chi.
Well,
Particularly.
on that note, can we get a bit woo? Can we talk a bit about
Yeah,
the
so
esoteric side of the creation of the Dantian and the movement of the microcosmic orbit and things like that,
yeah, whatever you want.
where that goes. So one of the things I'd really love to get your view on, and again, I'm kind of like goading you to tell me things that I already know, but I want you to explain it in your words to the audience because I can only
Sure.
explain it in my words so many times. Things like the condensing densification of the lower center that then like pushes this whatever up the spine. That's very, very different to something like running my attention up the spine and getting like heat responses or things like these little tingles and things. So maybe can I get your kind of take on that process and where that process can go if it's really taken a long way?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, those two different processes, I mean, the difference between them is one uses qi and one does not. So when I'm compressing and gathering everything into the, well, if that's what I'm doing, say we're talking about the lower dantian, and you want to gather the qi into this space, and people won't even agree where the lower dantian is, but for argument's sake, let's talk about the energy center in the lower abdomen, because that's what most people would know it as. So if I'm compressing that energy into this area or gathering it into here, it's not the intention that is going to make the difference. It's the reality of whether there is qi there or not. That is hard and fast. It can't be imagined into place. It can't be willed into place either. We have to train the body so that it produces and gathers the energy in that area. It's a very, very tangible and somatic thing that I'll explain in a second. The other part of it, when you move your mind up your spine or over your crown or down your front, or focus on acupuncture points, isn't it? Often people do sort of in order. It's got nothing to do with qi. What you're doing is your mind is interacting with a part of your nervous system, and the result is that you have more sensation in that area, so it will tingle. In the same way that if I put two fingers up and I put my awareness on my right finger, after a few seconds, my right finger now feels thicker and more dense and more powerful, and this one left finger feels kind of skinny, but it's definitely not because more qi went over there. It's because the nervous system is reacting to having my mind localized on that area. So it's just sensation, nothing more. So for most people, it's not really a problem. It'll just create sensation or feeling, but I wouldn't call that qi. I would call that a feeling. But then for other people, it can be a little bit of a problem, because if you have a very, very strong intent and your body nervous system is very, very blocked, you kind of get a situation where it tries to activate too much. Is that the nervous system, tries to turn on. Still nothing to do with qi, just your nervous system trying to turn on, but it's caught. So you get a kind of resistance, much like a cheap electrical circuit with too much power going through it. So you start to get heat building up in their area, and that creates a kind of pathological response. And this is why people will sometimes go on, I don't know, whatever it is, New Age retreats or yoga or Qigong or a million different things, Osho stuff or whatever. And then they start putting really strong intention into the body. And some people are fine. Most people are fine, but some people are not. And it kind of pushes their nervous system into a point where it's a problem, and then they get an extreme fight or flight reaction. So this is where sort of some of the Qigong problems come from. But again, such a small percentage of people, so not worth worrying about. The bigger issue is that for most people, it doesn't do anything. So if I'm going to continue running my mind up my spine and down my front, I'm not entirely sure what it does year after year after year, because it doesn't involve what Qigong is supposed to use, which is qi. So qi is a form of energy within your body, literally. There's a whole movement these days. I mean, it's probably started about a decade or two ago, where people started saying qi doesn't mean energy. That's an esoteric and woo-woo hippie way of defining it. No, it's not true. Qi means energy. It's the closest word we have in English. It means an energy that accumulates in your body. And what it takes the form of is either yin or yang qi. And yin qi, the one that is most important, is a gathering of magnetism in the abdominal space. The yin is defined as something that creates form and organizes. So as that magnetism gets stronger, magnetism has, fields around it. And what happens is your body starts to reorganize according to those fields. It's like you have a center within your body all of a sudden, and all of these tissues and everything start to rearrange and reorganize inside according to that energy center. And that is the formation of the lower dantian. Now, if you're looking at like things like the Xiaojuqian, the microcosmic orbit, and processes like that, they come later. They're definitely not starters practices, because in order for the microcosmic orbit to be the real thing, there has to be enough of the magnetism accumulated within your lower abdomen that it starts to pull and stretch and open the tissues and all of the channels up through the spine in the first place. So most people don't even encounter the microcosmic orbit for quite a number of years. Then it goes into various layers involving sort of transformation in your hormonal system and all kinds of things like this. But all of it should happen as a kind of byproduct. We can tweak it a little bit, we can sort of nudge it along, but really it should happen as a byproduct of the accumulation of qi within the body, energy. And I was like, I was talking to some students the other day, and it was some newer ones, and they're asking about the kind of like, can you scienceify Qigong, say this is the nerve, this is the lymph, this is the whatever, somatic feeling, whatever they want to say. And I pointed out to them, well, I kind of had that conclusion myself when I was about like 18 or something like this. But I was trying to rationalize away what I was seeing people around me manage, because I was lucky enough to be surrounded by 2 or 3 good teachers, and I was watching and I was trying to rationalize it. And in the end, it was my logic that helped me, because I realized I'm probably not the first person in this art to be the only one intelligent enough to figure out what qi really is. And every other generation that came before me all had it wrong. And all of the people that have all of this skill and all of this capability in 50 years in the arts, they all have it wrong. And they definitely just aren't as intelligent as little old me that understands, but it's just a physiological or psychological process. And once I reached that conclusion, I was like, all right, maybe I should explore this a bit. And then started to work with it. And you realize that no, qi is a form of magnetism that builds within the abdominal space and then starts to fill the rest of the body. And where that magnetism goes, it carries information, if you like, or it organizes or it opens the body. And that's how you get it to change from the inside. And if you don't do that, you can't really change the body on the inside. You can only change it on the outside. I mean, I can move my muscles and I can lift things to pressurize them, or I can stretch, or I can twist, but how do I do that with all the cavities on the inside? Unless I'm going to reach down through my throat and start trying to sort of push them out, it's very, very difficult to do. So you're going to need something that's going to open the inside, and that's where the dantian and that's where the qi comes from, But you're building it and it's accumulating in that area, which does happen through compression, for sure. There's a lot of squeezing in there, and that's why you have these analogies of like diamonds, which is things formed in pressure under the ground and all these kind of things. Once it starts forming under pressure, it's not a subtle thing. It's not, is it there, is it not? If you're asking if it's there, it's not. Like, it's crazily strong. It twists and torques the inside of the body according to its own will, and sometimes causes your body to open up or compress. And like the feeling of the dantian when it starts to form is so ridiculously strong that people have equated it to having a child kick inside their uterus or something like this, haven't they? Or all of these analogies they're using. It's very, very clear.
And so what kind of landmarks would you be looking for in a student to see that they've gotten, say, to the first stage of dantian development, whatever that may be?
Well, when the body mobilizes from the inside, which is, again, a term you will hear, right? Internal arts, the inside should move. The inside should move more than the outside. But it's very, very clear. Like, if I put my hand up and then I move my arm down and I move my arm, anyone with eyes, there's no question as to whether my hand is moving up and down. But then you will get people subtly pointing at a bit of their flesh and going, look, it's moving internally. No, it's not. It's so clear when the inside of the body moves that it is as clear as the arm going up and down. The insides of your body, the cavities, the diaphragm, the ribs, the spaces all start to mobilize because of this force on the inside of the body. And this is what you see on internal artists, whether it be Qigong people or Tai Chi or Bagua types, if they're after challenging art, whatever it is they're doing, that it looks like there's a series of cogs and everything mobilizing on the inside of their body. And that is the internal force moving because of the chi starting to shift. Whereas if somebody's body looks like a Lego man and then they got joints, then the Dantian is not forming, you know. So that would be the first hallmark. Does the inside move? And then it goes further than this again. It's like, is the body actually starting to be able to mobilize this sort of vibrating magnetic force through the body? And that's where you start to get into sort of deeper parts of Neigong and stuff like this.
And then you would move up to like the middle center and the upper center in sequence, right? You're not going to jump ahead or anything like this. You're just going to let this process kind of like slowly move through the layers of the.
Yeah, I don't actually believe in the upper Dantian, actually. I'll be totally honest.
Please tell me more about that.
Just to be controversial. I think that they place the Dantian in those locations almost in a way that the kind of chakras were hierarchy in yoga of yogic traditions of like your lower base desires and your higher spiritual things. But I don't believe that your head is more spiritual than your anus particularly. I mean, it's just a part of your body, but it's an easy hierarchy. You can see why you logically do it. But the lower Dantian means to me body, energy in this area of the abdomen that can mobilize all of the force. The middle Dantian is really for me when the chi starts to refine. So yes, we can kind of anchor it to the middle of the body a little bit, but I don't equate it with the heart. Particularly, it's just another little refinement. Upper Dantian actually means the highest and the most refined, rather than the kind of locale, if you want. So I talk about it being to do with the quality of what you're doing more than anything else.
And would this be related to things like samadhi and stuff like this?
Yeah, for sure. Sorry, it's literally just started to rain really hard here, so I don't know if the sound is going to disappear. I apologize if it does.
Cool. I think it's good that these microphones are pretty.
Okay.
I can't hear the sound of the rain at all at this point, so I'll let you know if it gets too hectic.
Balinese tropical storms. Yeah, so the upper Dantian, I think they do relate it to the head a little bit because there are certain glands in the brain that secrete substances that they call the amrita and the fluid at certain stages of training as a byproduct of mental states you hit. But I don't think as simple as saying there's a, like a energy center in the head particularly that is, you're meant to concentrate it on and enter into the jade realm or something. I don't see it that way. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So this is more about this whole same process, just getting more and more and more refined.
Yes, and further in. I mean, if you've got to the level where the Dantian is, the upper Dantian is your focus. What do they talk about in the upper Dantian? They say sort of Shen to emptiness. We're talking quite high levels of refinement. I would say that if you're talking about Shen to emptiness, you're probably not body localized anymore. Like if you're still working or you can feel your body, then you're not really working with Shen to emptiness or Shen to Dao. So therefore the upper Dantian can't, or at least work with the upper Dantian, can't actually be localized in the physical form anymore, if that makes sense.
Yes. You're kind of moving into a more refined layer of reality.
Yeah.
In some way.
Yeah. Something that sits in the background.
Yeah. So then there's the physical side of this. I kind of want to come back around to this maybe just as a nice ending point before we wrap up. That
Sure.
I've seen so many times these arts they're so fascinating, right? You do all this stuff, especially if you're doing Qigong, you get some strange capacities no one else has. And certainly for me, it was very tempting to like give up physicality, give up running around and jumping and exercising and things like this. No, the internal stuff's superior and I can just do that and everything will sort itself out. And again, I ran into this problem where I met so many people who'd done that and they have incredible internal capacities, but they're maybe a little bit crippled physically, having trouble walking or whatever. Incredible Shen capacities beyond my thing, but again, needing like assistance to help them around and things like that. And personally, I realized that I actually want to take care of this body at least until I die. So I went, okay, I need to bring the physicality back in and keep training this stuff. And it's been actually really lovely to come back to it after a break of some years with all these qualities now more in my system than before, at least. I don't know what level I'm at, but it certainly relatively to myself, it's much nicer. And so maybe you can speak a bit to that. I think you keep up an external-ish martial art practice for this reason.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it is an ongoing problem with the internal arts. So I would say, it's nonsensical unless you're, I mean, got a couple of weeks left to live, your end of your life, you may as well just abandon the physical body, I guess. But until that stage, you're going to need your physical body to go through. I mean, I don't know how old you are, Craig, but you don't look like an old man. So I would say you've got plenty of years left.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely looking after the physical body is a wise thing. And I don't believe that the internal arts do it. I think that the internal arts create, maybe you could say it's the difference between health and fitness or something like this, or health and strength. Like, I think internal health is taken care of very well with the internal arts, but definitely your external body does not. I mean, if you take something like Tai Chi, you could hardly call it a high impact hit cardio form of practice, could you? I mean, it's okay. Some of the forms have got some jumps and spins in, but it's hardly going to take care of your body. So I think that the vast majority of people do need to have a physical something that they do. So I have some quite external martial arts, and I also use the gym regularly as well. But I do recognize, counter to that, that the more physical exercise you do, it does actually take away from some of the levels of the internal arts. And there's no getting around it. It's just a fact. So, for example, say you're looking at something like Tai Chi and you're developing a nice level of Jin and you're kind of playing with it a bit. Then you go and you do some exercise and you contract all the muscles. The Jin is actually sputtery or stoppering or is not quite so good anymore. So what happens is Tai Chi people at that level start experimenting with all kinds of different exercises to find a way around it. And there isn't. It doesn't matter what you do. There's no clever movement. There's no functional patterns or whatever they try to do, I don't know, to try to sort of bypass that process. It does stop the Jin from mobilizing inside your body. And I'm just being totally honest here. So you end up in a conundrum. And the conclusion I reached in the end was I'd rather have less Tai Chi skill and a longer, healthier life, was the conclusion that I came to, essentially. So there's a bit of a payoff. So I have a cheap workaround, which is that if I know I have a Tai Chi course coming up, I don't do any exercise for about a week and a half beforehand. My body will just feel disgusting. It's like, oh no, my posture is not so good. Everything's a little unbound. I don't feel quite so good. But actually, then you can demonstrate the things that people expect to see. But then as soon as that course is done, I'm straight off to the gym and I'm doing exercises. I want to put my body back together because I would rather feel healthy. And there is that little bit sort of balance. And I don't know if people talk about that openly, but it is kind of true. And I think that every Tai Chi practitioner I've met will encounter this problem and then make peace with it. Some people will sacrifice their health for it. Other people are not prepared to, and I'm personally not prepared to, especially because Tai Chi is not really very important to me. And then you see people will try to create internal physical exercise systems, so they will use physical equipment, holding kettlebells to try to release the inside, which is very, very common. And I'd say that actually what they do is they strengthen the insides quite nicely, but they still stop the Jin. They very rarely actually get anything out because it's still, even if it's cleverly done, that physical exercise, it's still the force that needs abandoning for the Jin to be there, if you get what I mean. So it's an ongoing problem. But it doesn't seem to stop Qigong particularly. It doesn't get in the way of that side of the training, the Dantian, the Alchemy. That's all fine. It's literally the only thing it gets in the way of is the mobilization of the soft tissues for something like Jin in Tai Chi or Bagua.
Yeah.
That's it.
And you can't really like Jin a weight up into the sky or anything, can you?
Not really. I mean, you can decompress your body in a clever way, I suppose, so that it lives. But Jin is not really about that. I mean, Jin is about mobilizing your tissue so they capture the other person in a certain way. So no, I don't think
person-to-person dynamic.
the person-to-person thing, yeah, which is also why it's not actually a martial arts technique, you realize? I mean, this is the other thing that Fajin people, for some reason, rarely want to admit, and I don't know why, that no, it doesn't work in a cage. Because it's, I don't know why that's hard for people to admit. Like the Jin that you often see where someone is captured or bounced or uprooted, it's about two people's nervous systems communicating in a particular way. And the outcome is that it causes a sudden compression or decompression in the person that's being Fajinned into, right? So it becomes an interesting exercise to understand where force is being mobilized. But if put under tons and tons of pressure, as somebody trying to headbutt you and grab you in the throat and kick you in the groin is not going to happen. Yeah. So therefore, those kind of things are about another kind of training for the body and another kind of internal opening and mobilizing of energy. But they're not really what they're often sold as, I don't think, which I think is a shame. I think people should be more honest about it, actually.
Yeah, I mean, and it's odd to me that people like yourself get accused of that too. I see that all the time, and you're not all doing it. Every time I've heard you talk about it, it's been really clear like this, which has been super nice. So
Yeah, no, I mean, the classes here in Bali, I know you're not asking about Tai Chi, but since you're on it, I mean, we do Tai Chi classes, Xingyi classes, and Qigong classes. It kind of makes up the training here. But in the evenings, we have grappling and wrestling and pad work and boxing and takedowns. Like we have an external martial art syllabus for a smaller group, the ones that are interested in combat, because they all have to understand that combat is largely external. That's the nature of it. And internal arts and internal training is a form of cultivation that's layered on top of it. But in actual fact, like fighting is external. So you have to not worry about the release of your tissues during the moment when you're trying to defend yourself. That's the wrong moment, you know. But I think white people don't hear me on that.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's the same for lots of things. I actually horribly stacked a backflip trying to release. Oh, I'll just release and I'll go over smoother. And a backflip, like you need to really contract very suddenly, and it was a bad idea and landed on my face, which I'm still paying for to this day. So yeah, you've got to be a bit sensible with these things. Um, I'd like to just you one last point to touch on. You said that the weightlifting doesn't affect your qigong. Does it
No.
help your qigong?
Oh, ooh, that's interesting. Well, I think like anything, I think better health and strength definitely increases your qigong.
Mhm.
So that's for sure. There is a kind of energy that's formed in the body from physical exercise, so that's true. But I think it's not. I wouldn't say that it's sort of mastery of weightlifting or something that improves your qigong, if you get what I mean. But I think having a certain degree of strength. I mean, I'm a little bit of a podgy character, but I'm also very, very strong and very, very robust, and that assists in the qigong practice. So I guess it's more of your sort of overall well-being rather than a particular technique. And I would say that with regards to weightlifting, of course, you can always take something too far so that it gets in the way of everything. So sometimes if you go to the gym and you bench press the biggest weight you've ever done or something like that, and you come out and you can't move and everything is locked up, that gets in the way of your qigong, of
Mhm.
course. So you do have to be a bit sensible. You can't probably if you're built like the Rock, that's going to get in the way of your qigong a little bit. I advocate for a little bit of core strength, but you don't want to look like you're a Mr. Universe or something.
These people, when they come into my class, always have the worst time. It's so and then the static postures, not fun. Not fun to be in this state and then start to do internal stuff. It's like just stay with the bodybuilding. You'll have a better time.
And you must get loads more of it. It's not so much of a problem teaching in the UK because we don't have beaches, or you wouldn't go to our beaches, you die of a disease. So therefore, nobody's body's ever on display, so everybody's out of shape. Where Australia, you're all down at the beach all the time. So there's so many of the Australian students have this sort of ripped muscles and what have you. But yeah, there's a lot of tension to unwind.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And that goes for all the tensile sports, gymnasts
Yes.
and ballets and CrossFit. I think probably the worst I've run into in terms of like how much tension is held in their body. But it's they're polar opposite, right? If you're going for hyper contracting arts versus this is like opening arts, right? The internal stuff.
Rock climbers, I find, struggle as well
Oh, yeah,
because
yeah,
they're so tight around their hands. And it's like the power's on the opposite from all the gripping, which is very impressive, but it's just too far out on the other end of the
yeah.
body, extremities. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. I think that's probably enough for one day. Maybe we can get you back on in the future and we can go in down some other tunnels. But I just want to say thank you very much for your time. I had a blast. There were a few little nuggets in there that have like come into me and will be digested in whatever way they do. So thanks for that. Maybe just to wrap up, you can pin yourself, or you've got some online cert things that you do. You've got some books and things like this. Yeah, yeah. Do the sales pitch if you want.
I think anyone who's listened to me on a podcast knows I don't actually do that at the end because I
Oh, right.
really, I know, I tell you why. I think that anyone you ever try to reach out to do what you're doing won't like it. And I think actually people should organically seek me out if they're interested in what I do, and then they'll find me. That's
Ah,
my belief system. And I'm not
let the infield be big enough to draw them to you.
well, if that's what they want to do. And I'm also not really a marketer. And also, yeah, I also, more students means more pressure, more stress. So I'll advertise you instead. Go see Craig. Go do what he does.
Cool. Thanks, Damo. Well, yeah, we'll wrap it up there. I'll throw a link to your website on the show notes, and people can work it out if they want to from there. But otherwise, thank you, and I'll be back soon with a different guest at some point. Hopefully in the near future, or maybe a solo rambling. We'll see.